of the British people which are in favour of equality.
Peter Tatchell speaking on BBC News earlier. With me now, Councillor Ben Harris-Quinney, who is chairman of the Group, that's Britain's oldest conservative think tank, and he is opposed to same-sex marriage. Welcome, thank you for coming in. How do you respond to the comments there of Peter Tatchell?
Well, I think they're unfortunately weak, and they're unfortunately weak because the polling that I imagine Peter Tatchell is referring to there is hotly disputed, and I've seen polls which say almost exactly the opposite, that 70% of people are against gay marriage. But what we do know for certain, beyond the polls, is that the Conservative Party, the primary party that's putting this legislation forward, is hemorrhaging votes, and hemorrhaging votes predominantly to UKIP. And in my experience, on the doorsteps of Conservative voters, or indeed, unfortunately, formerly Conservative voters in some cases, they list same-sex marriage as a very significant reason for either leaving the party or switching their vote to UKIP.
How do you respond to the other charge that we heard there, which was that those who are opposed to this measure, leaving the opinion polling aside, and Peter Tatchell quoted his, I saw Nick Herbert quoting similar ones today, another Tory MP in favour of the change. But the problem here is that the view of the likes of Peter Tatchell is that this is actually about discrimination and prejudice. It's not about the marriage issue.
Well, again, what's very interesting about Peter Tatchell's position is Peter Tatchell has campaigned for a long time on something that he called the Equal Love campaign, which campaigned for civil partnership to be extended for all people. I was very much in support of that. I think a lot of Conservatives were very much in support of that. And one of the things that I was saying in the lead up to the introduction of the same-sex marriage bill was let's look at this more carefully, rather than trying to force this on the general public without mandate, and rather from a Conservative point of view, rather than trying to force it on the Conservative Party without mandate. Let's look at more holistic ways that we can bring forward equality in this country. And one such way is extending civil partnership to all people. What's very curious is that Peter Tatchell's now saying, well, yes, I support this, but I don't want it included in the same-sex marriage.
So are you saying we could have civil partnerships for everybody and marriage for everybody?
Well, I think it's got to be part of the same thing. And I think
would both sides of that debate be equal, is what I'm getting at. If you offered civil partnerships to heterosexual couples as well as gay couples, are you then saying, right, if that's allowed, gay couples can get married as well?
Well, I think you can debate whether it's called marriage or not, but a similar system, for example, to take would be France, where you have a religious ceremony and then you go to the registry office to make it legal before the state. And there are questions here, again, about the state's role in marriage. So if, for example, we had a system in this country where you had a religious ceremony and the religion in question would either allow same-sex marriage or not, depending on the core beliefs of that religion, and then you went to a registry office or some sort of council building in which you registered that marriage either as a civil partnership or a civil marriage, depending on what you want to call it.
One other issue that's been raised, and I mentioned Nick Herbert, Conservative MP, is in favour of same-sex marriage. He posed this question today: how would the wedding of two people of the same sex change or devalue Philip Hammond's own marriage, a reference to what the Defence Secretary said last night? What's the answer to that?
Well, I think the answer to that is marriage is very strongly tied, in many people's eyes, to religious institutions. As I say, I think there are debates around what role the state has to play in marriage, and those debates are welcome in my view. But where it comes to the church or churches and various religious faiths, I think there's real concern about the quadruple lock, whether that can hold. And I know Michael Gove has said that he has concerns about that privately. It was reported in the Evening Standard. So I would say that when it comes to state marriage, I think there is a point there. When it comes to religious marriage, I think people feel very strongly that that's between a man and a woman, and of course that forms a core part of their belief system. It may form a core part of the belief system of those that aren't religious, but I think that's the primary concern.
OK, we will see what happens when they debate it again on Monday. Thank you very much for coming in, Councillor Ben Harris-Quinney. The headlines for you now here on BBC News.